So, the following question is: what are your views about forming social relationships with clients during the time that they are in counseling with you? How about after they have completed counseling? Um, I believe as a counselor, boundaries need to be clearly defined. Essentially, what I mean by that is you are a professional and shouldn't have like a multiple relationship with your client. I think you can be supportive and friendly with your client. However, there does need to be that professional boundary and to not blend friendship or like any kind of intimacy. You really are there to be a professional, and I think it's important that boundaries are established. Um, Additionally, if a counselor attempts to blend roles that do not mix well together, that could be problematic. Going back to my initial statement of blending roles, I think it's important not to have like multiple relationships or multiple roles. Like your primary role is to be a counselor, and I think if you blur those boundaries and like develop like a friendship or like a more intimate rapport, I think that can prove to be problematic and even harmful or detrimental to the client. An example would be a professional role and a role as a friend. Yes, so that is a really good example. Again, you have that professional role as a client, but you can't have that duality of being a friend as well. I think you can be professional and friendly and supportive, and have that friendly, kind, caring demeanor, but I would be very apprehensive in pursuing an actual friendship with the client. And another statement I wanted to share is that the primary role of a counselor is to be a counselor. Yes, it's essentially very simple. The primary role of a counselor is to be a counselor. Essentially, you are rendering a service. You have your clients. You're going to have, a session that's, say, 53 minutes long. They're going to be in there. You're going to help them to the best of your ability. They're going to leave. And again, just having that those professional guidelines. Like as a, for instance, if a client said, "Oh, I'm graduating in 2 months and I'd love if you came to my graduation," that would mean so much to me. That would be a challenging question to answer, not because it would be hard to differentiate what is appropriate, but you don't want to disappoint your client or make them feel like you don't care about them. So I think there's going to be certain instances where you just might not know how to react or how to appropriately respond. And I think just through experience, through the years and having multiple clients, you're going to develop that professional rapport and know how to just naturally create those boundaries between the counselor and the clients. But I think there are certain instances where you just have to like draw a line in the sand. If intuitively and by the ACA Code of Ethics as a reference that something is not deemed as appropriate, I think it is good to be transparent with your client if something seems inappropriate or just not professional. I believe that multiple relationships can be harmful to clients and create a power differential. So like an example of multiple relationships is like being the counselor, but also being like the friends, or being the counselor, but also being like the mentor or like the life coach. And I think that would be actually easier to do. Actually relatively easy to naturally blur out those lines, because I think a counselor obviously has their best interests in hand, and I think it would be very easy to like fulfill that that friendship role, like that mentorship role, because ultimately, you want your client to be happy, and at the end of the day, it's two people talking to each other. So essentially, you do want that connection and that rapport to naturally develop, and I think that's really important. I think you should be a friend to your clients, and care for them. You just have to, know to have professional boundaries. And I think it is best to create that professional boundary and to not pursue a social relationship with the client. That being said, yes, during your sessions, you will be building a social relationship. But if they say to you, gee whiz, next Saturday, my friends and I are going out to a bar to, celebrate a reunion, that would be a questionable scenario. So you just have to know there could be certain instances where you get like an invitation to a party from a counselor, and I think you just have to know what is appropriate and what is inappropriate. Another statement I wrote down, this is going on to a completely different topic, but I think if it's a former client, it's just a completely different ball game. If it is a former client, I think it is appropriate to form a friendship or a social relationship, because you are no longer creating a multiple relationship and there is no power differential because they're no longer your client. So I think if that person is no longer like receiving services for you, is now like a former client, I actually do think it's perfectly appropriate to develop a friendship, and because essentially they're no longer a client of yours. So that's just a completely different dynamic, and I think it is okay to not have those like really strict boundaries and guidelines at that point. Another bullet point I wrote is an example. My counselors in the past were friendly, but I knew they were not my friends, and I was okay with that. It's no different than seeing a doctor or a chiropractor. You are there to receive services, not to develop an intimate relationship or friendship. I think that is a good comparison. Like, for instance, I used to work as a chiropractic assistant, and it's not that he didn't care about his patients. I think essentially he was rendering services for them, and there were instances where you'd have like a chatty Kathy, and she's going on and on and on about her day and her personal life and her boyfriend and her kids. And it's not that my boss didn't acknowledge her, but he definitely created like a boundary, like space between them, and I think that was like a professional thing to do. And same thing working as a chiropractic assistant, like I was there to do my job and essentially make people feel better and provide them the health services that they're requesting, but to keep it on a professional level and not to talk about like really personal things. And yeah, as I said, it's, seeing a chiropractor, same thing as a doctor. They aren't going to develop like a personal relationship with their patient. That's just not appropriate. Another bullet point I would like to reference is professionals can get into trouble when their boundaries are poorly defined, or really when they attempt to like blend roles. So again, that duality of trying to fulfill two roles, especially when there's that power differential between the counselor and client. I think really it is the counselor's job. I think it's the counselor's job to create that, like those defined boundaries. But circling back to if it is a former client, as I initially stated, I think it's different because they're no longer currently seeing you. So if you want to pursue a friendship or just pursue them on a social level, I think that's perfectly fine and appropriate.